He ends up falling in love with a Russian girl. And let's go. In an ordinary high school in Japan, a young girl named Alice stands out wherever she goes. Her nickname is Alia. Daughter of a Russian father, Alia has the best grades in the school and excels in sports. Additionally, she holds the position of treasurer of the student council. These qualities make her one of the most desired girls by her peers, and one who cannot resist this charm is a second-year boy, full of himself. As always, he introduces himself and invites her to lunch, but she refuses without hesitation. Determined not to give up, he tries to find out if he can at least get her phone number. Alia, showing no interest, firmly refuses and even makes a point of humiliating him publicly by pointing out that the necklace he wears is against school rules, which results in his expulsion from the student council. Upon arriving in the classroom, Alia deals with admiring looks from the boys who cross her path. She sits at the back of the classroom and tries to say good morning to her friend Kuze. But he doesn't wake up, so she resorts to pushing his chair before asking if he stayed up late watching anime again. He admits that he stayed up until dawn debating with his friend about an episode they watched. Alia then gives the boy a lesson, calling him an idiot for sacrificing sleep to watch cartoons, only to be sleepy the next day at school. Kuze, with his irreverent manner, accepts the nickname with humor, saying that if being an idiot means loving a work of art without being bound by the limitations of time, then he is one. Kuze can't help but yawn from exhaustion. In one of those moments, Alia murmurs something to him, and Kuze, curious, asks what she said. She replies that she called him pathetic but without much importance. The boy soon realizes that the chemistry class has started, but since he didn't bring the materials, he asks to join her. His sudden interest disappears when the teacher starts writing words like estrogen, tungsten and oxygen on the board, trying to prevent his friend from falling asleep again. Alia, with a watchful look, lightly taps his rib with a pen, making him stand up quickly. The problem arises when the teacher asks what the chemical element is that shares the name with the writer of a famous anime, putting Alia in a difficult situation to help Kuze. She pretends to point to one of the elements on the periodic table and answers strontium. But the teacher disapproves, stating that the answer is wrong. Then Alia, with a mischievous smile, responds, helium, the correct alternative, leaving Kuze surprised to realize he was so skillfully tricked. After the embarrassment, Kuze complains that it was a dirty trick, but Alia feigns innocence and says she only pointed out the correct element. She then makes a comment in Russian, and Kuze, curious, asks what she said. She replies that she called him an idiot. However, what Alia doesn't know is that Kuze understands Russian. In fact, he learned the language as a child, playing with a Russian girl who lived near his grandfather's house. To avoid embarrassing Alia, and not wanting to reveal that he understood, he decides to keep it a secret. Later, Kuze decides to take his phone, and Alia, responsible for enforcing the rules, reprimands him, explaining that the use of electronic devices is prohibited except in urgent cases. Kuze, without hesitation, argues that it's an emergency because a legendary character was released for free in the game, but only those who get it within 10 minutes can acquire it. Alia decides to confiscate the phone and is surprised to see that Kuze got the character Tsukuyomi, a moon goddess from Japanese mythology. When she questions why Tsukuyomi has silver hair, Kuze reveals that he doesn't care about the color, as long as the goddess remains powerful. Alia, now a little jealous, returns the phone to Kuze and says, in Russian, that she also has silver hair. Kuze, intrigued, asks what she said, and Alia, embarrassed, replies that she called her an addict. Kuze, with a smile, responds that to compete you need to be addicted. As part of a group that needs to achieve its own accomplishments through effort, Kuze comments that he prefers to work hard to get his equipment, rather than being like the spoiled playboys who ask their parents to buy them platinum armor. Tired, Alia complains, thinking that Kuze was more serious than that. Later, at lunchtime, Takeshi, one of Kuze's friends, starts complaining once again about not being popular with the girls. Ignoring the friends' drama, the boys at the table watch the student council group entering the cafeteria, including Alia, her sister Maria, who is the secretary, and Suki, the spokesperson. Kuze's friends comment on how beautiful these girls are, highlighting that, according to Alia, she already has a boyfriend. Kuze jokes that even if she didn't, Takeshi wouldn't stand a chance. While hearing these, Kuze looks at Suo, who returns the gaze with a slightly flushed face. Soon Suo approaches and asks if she can sit with them. She joins the table next to Alia, who maintains her usual serious expression. During lunch, Suo is friendly as always, while Alia remains reserved. Kuze and Suo seem to be getting along very well, which bothers Alia. Curious, she asks if the two are friends. Sue responds that they have known each other since preschool and studied together throughout childhood. When the other guys finish eating and leave to return the trays, Sue takes the opportunity to get closer to Kuze and asks if he has considered the idea of joining the student council. As he had said before, Kuze refuses, stating that he is not interested. Even Sue insists, saying he would be a great member, especially because he already has experience as vice president. Leia, surprised, asks about this. Sue explains that Kuze was her vice president in middle school. Kuze, however, insists on reminding that he only accepted because Sue insisted a lot and she needed someone in the position. Sue defends Kuze, telling Leia that he knows what he's doing. Leia, in Russian, comments that she already knows that very well while finishing her can of Oshiruko. At the school exit, Sue says goodbye to both. Leia takes the opportunity to express her surprise at seeing Kuze talking so naturally with another girl, as she thought he didn't have any female friends. Kuze points to Leia, indicating that she is his friend. Intrigued, Leia reflects, and after a few seconds concludes that yes. Then she leaves, saying she needs to resolve something with the student council, leaving Kuze alone. Shortly after, we are taken to a childhood memory of Kuze. He was playing with a Russian girl near his grandfather's house. They admired the sunset together, and the girl corrected his pronunciation or completed his sentences when he didn't know what to say. When the sun set, she would say goodbye with a loving kiss on his cheek. Back in the present, Kuze wakes up with this memory, recalling how he studied Russian intensely to be able to talk to her, but realizes that nowadays he doesn't even remember her name. The next day, as was common in that school, Kuze and Alice were the ones responsible for organizing the classroom before the first class. Since he woke up very early because of the dream, the young man went to school much earlier to take care of things, so there was nothing left to do when his task partner arrived. She thinks it's going to rain because she had never seen this guy care so much about organization, and Kuz notices a stain on his friend's sock. She says that a truck drove through water and splashed her, and that it was also her fault for walking so close to the street. But anyway, she brought another pair of socks, so it's all good. Changing the subject, Alice also asks if Kuze really isn't interested in joining the student council, since he was vice president once. Not having the patience for it, the boy repeats that he doesn't want to. So, Alice drops the subject and takes off the dirty sock, making Kuze turn away in embarrassment at the smile the girl gives. It seems that was the intention. The next step of the plan was to cross her legs and ask the boy to get her spare sock from the locker, since she had taken it off before and now couldn't step on the floor. Without much patience, he agrees and picks up the sock. The girl asks him to put it on her. This time he couldn't help but question what was going on. Then she explains that it's a reward for him fetching the sock, and then speaks in Russian that it's also a reward for her, after another sudden confession from the girl in another language. Kuze starts to think about what her intention is with this kind of thing. Maybe she's tired of playing perfect for the whole school, and uses him as an escape valve. Anyway, as the girl pretended to call him a coward in Russian, he holds her foot and starts putting on the sock, even after all the bitterness there. Alice says she's not ready for this, but Kuze goes all the way because he was called a coward. The problem is that, in the middle of this, he ends up bumping his hand where he shouldn't. Then, Alice kicks the warrior in the face, who is defeated and left to die alone at the back of the classroom. Hours later, the boy returns from the ashes to apologize. Then, Alice calls him a leg pervert in Russian. However, she also apologizes for kicking the boy and tries to put her hand on him to see if he's okay. The young man loses his cool and ends up saying that he should be grateful for the beautiful view granted to him during that kick. Immediately, Alice punches the young man in the face and curses up to the 5th generation of the man's family in Russian, then runs off to try to resolve this mess. Kuze chases after the girl throughout the school, but her physical education skills allow her to keep a certain distance. Yet 10 minutes later, the two are breathless after the marathon run. When he catches his breath, Kuze apologizes again, and Alice acknowledges that she was partly to blame. To make up for the mistake, the boy gives the girl a can of gold, a drink she loves. Even though she makes a fuss at first, in the end, she accepts it, and after taking a sip, she offers some to him. In Russian, Kuze goes crazy at the possibility of an indirect kiss happening, but since he doesn't want to reveal that he understands the language, he pretends to be clueless once more. Alice jokes in Russian that the guy doesn't understand anything she says. Then Kuze finally loses his patience. One day later, Kuze shows up to help with something Alice called him for. So he arrives asking what it's about, and Alice criticizes the boy's lack of manners, because the right thing would be to ask if she has been waiting for a long time. Then he acts out what the girl requested with integrity, making Alice play along, looking at it with a displeased expression. Alice comments that the two really get along well, leaving Kuzey embarrassed, gradually losing the joy in his eyes. Alice asks the boy to get some board games and a higher shelf, because apparently she doesn't know how to climb a ladder. After that, she explains that she uses these games to display at school festivals, as well as having played them during a recent meeting of the new student council to start a conversation. Kuzey wants to know who won, and So responds that he is looking at the champion beside him. Leah asks for less talk and more work. When So goes to do something elsewhere, Leah repeatedly says she wants attention, leaving the boy unsure how to react. With the storage room tidied up, the students are surprised by the approach of Kenzaki, the student council president. Kenz comments that he has heard a lot about Kuzey's talent, and the boy thanks him for the recognition. At the same time, Kuzey analyzes that this guy really has a certain style, and that must be why he is the school's superstar president. Anyway, it doesn't concern him, so he says goodbye. Before leaving, Kenzaki offers to pay for his dinner as a way of thanking him for cleaning the storage room. Kuzey politely refuses, but Suo insists, saying he won't have dinner ready when he gets home. Kuzey questions how she knows that, and then she reveals that they are childhood friends. Therefore, the president also invites the two girls. Later, after placing their order, the four of them talk, and Yu emphasizes how amazing Kosei is for handling physical work and paperwork as if it were nothing, in addition to being a great master of ceremonies and negotiator. Kenzaki knows she doesn't usually praise others like that, so this guy must really have potential. Thinking about it, the president invites Kuzey to the student council, but for the 1000th time, he refuses, saying that what he did in elementary school was enough, and now he's tired of that kind of thing. Kenzaki agrees that the council is a lot of work, but points out that the reward is worth it. Frankly, he emphasizes that Kosei's participation in the council will have a huge impact on his job market recommendation. Kuzey responds that he is not very ambitious, but Suo insists they run together again. Kuzey argues that she will win the presidency with or without him, but Suo insists on having him by her side on this journey. Again, he refuses, this time with less patience. Kenzaki then says that maybe Suo is not the best candidate since Alia will also be running. When the girl confirms this, Suo gives her a defiant look. Soon, everyone's food arrives. After the meal, everyone says goodbye. Then Kenzaki says he will accompany Suo while asking Kosei to take Alia home. Alia refuses the company, but the boy doesn't want to leave her alone at night. On the way, he asks if she really intends to run for student council president. Without patience, she confirms once again. Then she says she can walk the rest alone and thanks for the company. Upon arriving home, Cozy notices women's shoes at the entrance seats. Then, he sees a girl sitting on the sofa reading a book and asks what she is doing there. While commenting on this story, she informs him that she will sleep there tonight, even without the homeowner knowing. In the novel she is reading, she complains that the protagonist doesn't realize he is the older brother of a character. Kosei finds it ironic that this girl is talking about it, since she pretends to everyone that she is just his childhood friend. Surprised, Sue turns and asks if it's not true, since they have known each other forever and are close. Then she confirms that the older guy in the story is really the character's brother. Kuzey considers that maybe they are half-siblings or something like that. However, Sue grabs him by the collar and responds that the narrative is only good because they are blood siblings. The next day, Sue wakes up her brother by bothering him. He threatens to report her for domestic violence. So with no options, the girl promises to hide under his bed to pull his foot at night. Fed up, Kuz tells his sister to go downstairs. She asks if it's because he will end up getting armed if she stays there. Later, they go to the cinema together to watch Spaceboy 11. Suo gets emotional seeing exclusive relationship scenes that never appeared on TV and already wants to watch the movie again. At this moment, Kuzey puts his sister's feet on the ground and reminds her that they need to shop at a clothing store. Suo would love to buy a summer dress but prefers to go bankrupt buying anime items. Kuzey thinks it's absurd for a simple piece of cloth to cost 15,000 yen, but the girl explains that women's fashion charges for every centimeter of fabric. Changing the subject, the brother comments that maybe a silver thing is spying on them. Meanwhile, Alia watches them from afar with an expression of hatred. Suo says she noticed it long before, since they arrived on that floor, because she has a sixth sense for detecting the looks of people she knows. Kuzey asks if his sister isn't ashamed to say something so absurd with such firmness, and she admits she is, but doesn't break character. Soon he wonders how he can deal with that, until he looks back and sees his brother going directly towards Alia. Having nowhere to hide her face, the Rosan pretends she bumped into the two by chance at the mall, and both pretend to believe it. The Rosan says she came to buy some clothes, so Sue invites everyone to have lunch together. Kuzey is hesitant to take her to that restaurant, and his sister comments that the guy was looking forward to it, leaving Alia surprised. The Russian asks what's wrong with the place, so Sue asks if she likes spicy food, since that's the focus of the house. Kuze is more direct with the friend and warns that the dishes there burn more than hell in the middle of summer without a fan, but Alia decides to face it without hesitation. Upon arrival, as expected, the restaurant's name is Cauldron of Hell, and Alia's eyes widen. Sue says it's just a little spicy, making her colleague frown while Kuze tries to warn once again that all hope should be abandoned. Even so, the Russian decides to open the gates of the underworld. Regardless, Alia remains firm. Already seated, she doesn't understand anything on the menu, so Sue explains that the hell of the blood pool is a ramen with red broth, the mildest on the list.